Good day, everyone. My name is Rebecca Lilly for the International Association for Energy Economics. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar entitled The Direct and Indirect Effects of Environmental Subsidies. We are grateful to Dr. Kinga Zorzica for today's timely discussion. First, a little bit about the International Association for Energy Economics. We are the largest association specializing in the field of energy economics and provide a forum for the exchange of ideas, experience, and issues among professionals interested in the field. The organization produces 2 professional journals, a newsletter, and holds conferences and virtual presentations, along with a host of other products and services that you can find at our website at www.iaee.org. If you're not already a member of the association, we welcome you to join. A few housekeeping matters in regard to today's webinar before I hand things over. First, this webinar is being recorded for those that cannot participate in today's live event. If you have questions for our panelists, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window and type your question. We have allocated time at the end of the webinar to read and answer them. Now I would like to introduce you to Ronald Huisman, head of BAEE, to give a few words about his organization.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Well, welcome everybody on behalf of the Benelux Association for Energy Economics. My name is Ronald Huisman, and on behalf of the BAE, also Marit van Hout is here present. And we are very lucky and happy that Kinga Zorzica is willing to do the webinar today. I met Kinga in Barcelona, where she also does some work at the University of Barcelona, but she's more related to the Kosminski University, if I'm right. And if I'm not, you will correct me, Kinga. And today she will talk about her research paper, the direct and indirect effects of environmental investment subsidies. And she has used Dutch data for that, and that basically attracted me, well, even more to that paper. And I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, Kinga. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited. Thank you for the invitation and for organizing this webinar. As Rebecca said, and Ronald also, my name is Kinga Tchórzewska. I was recently employed at Kosminski University as an assistant professor, but I'm also a research associate at Barcelona Institute of Economics. And let me share my slides for today's talk. Okay. Perfect. I will today talk about the results of the study that I have carried out with Marianna Marino from Schema Business School and Pierpaolo Parotta from ESIC School of Management. And as it was told before, it's about the direct and indirect effects of environmental investment subsidies. So let me start with saying one thing, and that's that firms are reluctant to invest in green technologies. So what are we supposed to do about that? Well, scholars have identified that it's the government that should play a crucial role in transitioning into a cleaner economy. And the literature is also clear that it's the market-based instruments that are better than command and control regulations. And within those market-based instruments, economists are especially enthusiastic about environmental taxes. However, there is a big resistance in the industry. So it's good to consider also other alternatives and see how efficient those other instruments are. And one of such instruments is environmental investment subsidies. So let's get to the bottom of it. What are the pros? What are the cons of the investment subsidies? Well, first of all, it's true that once we fund the environmental technologies, so once we diffuse environmental technologies, this will produce clear environmental and social returns, and inevitably it will result in higher social welfare. And there is right now growing extensive literature showing how pollution affects health outcomes, mortality, costs, labor productivity, school absenteeism, even car accidents. So if we can encourage firms to reduce pollution by investing in cleaner production technologies, this will have higher social welfare. Additionally, also subsidies are good in the sense that they translate into a smaller cost to the company, right? Because they deal with capital market failure. So they reduce this initial barrier for each firm, especially smaller firms, to eco-innovate. And also introducing a new technology into the production process can be unclear and can be a bit risky. So subsidy in a way mediates this uncertainty that each firm is facing. But of course, nothing is all perfect. So one big question mark that we might have is once we fund those subsidies, are they actually spent well? Are they spent efficiently? Like, will they result in opportune use of public expenditures? Another concern is regarding the private information and whether the firms can use private information on what would be the best existing technology to adopt, as it's the case with environmental taxes. Another question mark is regarding the crowding in versus crowding out, because we might be concerned whether firms that would have invested in green technology anyway are just substituting their own money with subsidy, right? So it's not crowding in any additional investment. And lastly, because usually, and lastly, there might be a question mark regarding whether subsidy scheme, if it's not updated regularly, it might lead to technology lock-in. And so due to time constraints, I do not want to talk too much about the literature. I just want to assure you that there is a wide range of papers showing that environmental policy has positive and relevant effects on adoption of green technologies, but there is little focus on two key issues. So one problem is that there is minimal formal guidance on how to establish the optimal dose of subsidies. And there is some work now being done with regards to R&D, subsidies, and environmental taxation. And the second issue is regarding what kind of unintended effects the environmental subsidies might generate. So whether firms actually decide to divert some of the money away to other activities that we're not aware of. And this is exactly what we're trying to tackle in this particular paper. So we're trying to investigate the effect of an environmental investment subsidy on adoption of green technology and on green R&D at the firm level. And we will look both at the proportional increase, but also at the dose response. So how firms react to higher doses and smaller doses of an environmental investment subsidy received. And here we look both at the intended effects, so those direct effects on technology adoption, and unintended indirect effect on environmental R&D. And here we make an important distinction because we disaggregate the total amounts of money invested in green technology into specific subtypes following the recent developments in eco-innovation literature. So I'm not sure if all of you are familiar, but basically there are two main types of green technologies. One is called end-of-pipe, the other one is called cleaner production technologies. And the end-of-pipe technologies are usually considered inferior, and that's because they do not interfere in the production process. They solely reduce the pollution at the end of the production pipe. So you can think of end-of-pipe technologies as filters or silver scrubbers. While the cleaner production technologies, they actually are also called process integrated technologies, and they change the production process. Very often they limit the use of natural resources, and hence they're more energy efficient, they're more cost efficient, and they result in a smaller amount of pollution produced. So this is one thing that we will pay attention to in this paper. Then when it comes to the unintended effects, we look both at the distinction between internal and external green R&D. So we will pay attention to whether firms decide to innovate within the firm or whether they want to outsource some of the green R&D activity to a different institution or a firm. To study this, those questions, we use a data set of over 1,900 industrial firms, as Ronald said, in the Netherlands between 1999 and 2011. And one particular thing that I want you to have in mind when you think of this study is that we only use firms that have received an environmental subsidy. So all of our firms in our data set used this subsidy program. When it comes to the methods, we use two for robustness checks. So we use fixed effects model, where we study both the proportional and dose response effect and the nearest neighbor matching. And again, here we look at the dose response effect. Well, I'm sure that there are many people that know Netherlands much more than me, but to my knowledge, Netherlands relies on a highly traded carbon-intensive product. So it's very important that it uses a comprehensive set of environmental policy instruments, and it's trying to do it. So since the 80s, energy policy has been the cornerstone of that strategy, and the country appears in the list as one of the most generous countries in the environmental policy indicators. It has very large number of subsidy programs. And the particular environmental subsidy program that we will focus on is the one managed by the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy and by the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, where different technologies have to compete under a single budgetary ceiling. And the objective of this subsidy program is to encourage firms to make environmental investments such that, first of all, of course, an environmental friendly technology is involved, but also that this chosen technology continues to have a small market share in relation to non-environmental technologies, that the environmental friendly technology is less expensive than alternative polluting technologies, and that the investment is made in the Netherlands. So this particular environmental subsidy program is funded through a surcharge on electricity and gas use. And there is no eligibility criteria, really. Any firm can have access to this subsidy program. So we are, to study those research questions, we use a unique panel data set created by Statistics Netherlands. So we combine, thanks to access of the data, we combine two unique firm level surveys. One is called the production cost and the other one is called the environmental costs of firms. And this results in a balanced panel of, as I said, over 1,900 Dutch firms over 12 years. So in total, it's around 8,691 firm year observations. And each firm reports its sector at the 2-digit level. So it's quite accurate. When it comes to the variables that we can use in the study, it's quite nice because we have information on capital assets, on turnover, indebtedness, operative income, value added, export status, and even other subsidies that firms have received. Most importantly, however, we have data on the environmental investment subsidies, so the exact amount of environmental investment subsidy that each firm has received, as well as the exact amounts of money that each firm has spent on adoption of different types of green technologies and the amount of money that they have spent on internal and external green R&D. We have done the data cleaning, so all the monetary values are deflated at the 2% year price level. And of course, we subtract the amount received from the subsidy scheme from the investment levels, such that we do not report those tautological proportional increase. I want to assure you also that our data set is representative of the Dutch industrial sector. So in our data set, we have mostly firms that are between 20 to 50 employees. When it comes to the industries that we observe, those firms within our data set are from sectors such as metal products, machines, apparatus, wood, paper, food, beverage, tobacco, rubber products, and others. We have carried out the descriptive statistics, and I want to point out to a few things that appear immediately. So first of all, the average amount of environmental subsidy that each firm receives is around 4,000 euros. And this is actually representative of the European level of other European countries. For example, in Spain, the amount of environmental subsidies received is very similar. And then another thing that we can notice at first glance is that firms spend much more money on adoption of green technologies rather than on environmental R&D, right? So we have this 14,000 to 5,800. And sadly also, firms mostly spend the money on end-of-pipe technologies rather than the process integrated technologies. So the investment is slightly higher for those inferior end-of-pipe technologies. I also just want to quickly show you the pretreatment variables that we use in our analysis. So those are the capital stock, sales per employee, EI per employee, subsidies per employment, other subsidies. So when it comes to the main specification, it's rather straightforward. So we use a fixed effects model with firm fixed effects and standard errors clustered at the firm level. We use a set of controls. And most importantly, we use both our environmental and subsidy variable and our outcome variables in log terms so that we can identify this proportional effect. And as I have not told you yet, but I will now, the biggest problem with analyzing environmental investment subsidies is that those are voluntary policies, right? Because firms, they have to apply themselves to receive it. And so this kind of analysis usually suffer from self-selection problems, such as this natural willingness of certain firms to use subsidies. So ideally, we would like to have this almost random situation when each firm is exposed to a subsidy or not by this act of randomness. But this, unfortunately, is not usually the case. So the solution that we offer in this paper is that instead of looking at the effect of receiving a subsidy versus not, we want to look at the proportional effect and those response effects of receiving higher amounts or smaller amounts of subsidies. Let's get to the results then. So actually I have not included it in this particular presentation, but we start our analysis by looking at the proportional effect of environmental subsidy on total amount of environmental investment. And this is positive and statistically significant very consistently. When we look at more particular amounts of money, so when we look specifically at the process integrated, those superior technologies, we can see that the proportional effect is still statistically significant and positive. However, the coefficient decreases a bit. And this might suggest that actually firms use the environmental investment subsidy for they use it for investment in process integrated environmental investment. However, they might be more willing to use it for end-of-pipe technologies. And we can, when we look at the dose response effects in our third model specification, where we use controls, lagged dependent variable, and firm fixed effects, we can see that the effect is around 0.26 for being above the 50th percentile of the dose response, while for receiving an environmental investment subsidy above the 75th percentile, the effect increases quite significantly to 0.61. However, when we look at the investment in end-of-pipe technology, you can see much higher coefficients, which basically confirms this theory that firms actually, which shows that environmental investment subsidy drives investment in end-of-pipe technologies much more than cleaner production technologies. So here we can see that even above the 70th percentile, it's equal to 0.82, while for the 50th percentile, it's 0.40. So what about the environmental R&D? Do firms derive some of the money away to internal R&D? Do they use this environmental subsidy flexibly? And in general, I can tell you that yes, they do. And interestingly, the coefficients are actually as high, almost as high as for the technology adoption. The models actually, they have also quite a high R-squared, which suggests that the data fits, the model fits the data quite well. And again, we can observe this increasing effect as firms receive higher doses of environmental subsidy. So the higher dose of an environmental subsidy that they receive, the more money they divert away to internal R&D. And we can observe this also for external R&D. However, here I'm a bit more reluctant to analyze it as clearly because this, as you will see in a second, it's not perfectly robust to other methodology. So as I have told you, we have also carried out our analysis using nearest neighbor matching. And we match exactly on firm size dummies and sector dummies. And when we look at this, those response effects using this methodology, we can see a similar story. So first of all, we can see that both end-of-pipe technologies and process integrated technologies are stimulated by higher doses of environmental subsidies. However, the effects are higher for end-of-pipe technologies and especially at higher doses. So it seems that as firms receive higher doses of environmental subsidy, they're more likely to spend it on end-of-pipe technologies rather than process integrated technologies. When it comes to the R&D amounts, firstly, I want to show you what I have meant before, which is that the results are not robust to the different methodology and also the different definition of our outcome variable, because we look here both at the dependent variable in log amounts and the growth. So the first differencing of log amounts, and here the coefficients, they lose their statistical significance. However, we can still observe this positive effect on internal R&D. And we can see that firms do seem to divert some of the money away when they receive environmental subsidy above the 50th percentile. Then this decreases a bit for after they receive when they receive the environmental subsidy above the 75th percentile. So we of course carry out robustness checks to make sure that our analysis holds for different situations. So as I have shown you, we use fixed effects and nearest neighbor matching. We use first differencing of the outcome variables to control for time invariant unobserved qualities. We remove crisis years to make sure that it's not the crisis that drives our results. And we also carry out some kind of extensions analysis. So we perform heterogeneity with respect to firm size. And here we show that larger firms typically show significantly larger direct and indirect effects, which is to be expected. And also larger firms invest more in cleaner production, while smaller firms in end of pipe. So here this might be related to the fact that end-of-pipe are just more easily implementable and they're cheaper. So that's why smaller firms depend on them. When it comes to the heterogeneity with respect to firm energy intensity, we can see that medium energy intensive industries adopt green technologies the most. However, the most energy intensive industries such as chemical plants, petroleum, coal, gas, use subsidies to finance EP rather than cleaner production technologies. So here I have actually myself questions, which is that, is it because cleaner production technologies are not as efficient at pollution reduction still, and we should invest more in environmental R&D to make it more efficient? Or is it just CP is just still too expensive? And lastly, most energy intensive firms seem to outsource their R&D as a result of the subsidy received. So just to conclude, a few last notes. With this analysis, we try to go beyond the general assessment of environmental subsidies on adoption of green technologies and green innovation. And we find evidence that the Dutch subsidy was successfully increasing both cleaner production and end-of-pipe technologies. However, as you increase the amount of subsidy, firms are more likely to invest the money in end-of-pipe technology rather than cleaner production technologies. So when it comes to the policy implications, it's really the policies should be much better defined, a better targeting is needed. And internal R&D is more easily encouraged through the use of environmental subsidies than external R&D. And it seems that the sufficient dose is that of the 50%. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope there are some questions.
Well, thank you very much, Kinga. There was one Q&A, I think a somewhat more clarifying question by André. André, maybe I will ask it because it's a small question myself. But why did you choose this time period, 1999-2011? Is it just data availability, or is there another reason for it?
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer this question. This is something that frustrates me a lot because we live in the era of big data where big firms have access to amazing data, very data intense. But when it comes to firm level data, it's always a problem of data availability. So this is, we would love to have more recent data, but it's just not available at the moment. Maybe in some time.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I would like to invite people to ask questions if you have any. I hope André is satisfied with the answer. Because what struck me on in your conclusions is that you said, like, firms given the largest subsidies, they spent most on end-of-pipe improvements, basically. But at the same time, you say, like, these are small firms that also are mostly investing into these end-of-pipe technologies. So it seems to be that the smaller firms receive the largest subsidies. Is that true?
There's something that I don't know. Actually, this is something that maybe we should check. Maybe you should check. But I don't think that that's the case. I would say that there is this heterogeneity in results. So I think it's for smaller firms, it's just given how expensive the cleaner production technologies are, the easier way out for them when you don't have that much financial liquidity is to not to change your production process and basically just put a plaster, right? Which is how I consider end-of-pipe technologies. So to invest, no matter how much of a dose of environmental subsidy you receive, probably your own financial liquidity is not that much. So you will tend to use a technology that is cheaper and more easily implementable.
And were these subsidies given? So the SDE plus, was it? Is there a focus on a preference for process changes than of end of pipe, or did they not, specify any preferences?
I think they do not specify the preferences. So this is actually something that I also observed with Spanish data, that the programs that exist out there, they're very general and they do not specify much what kind of technologies should be financed. They usually just say something very vague, like something that goes beyond the current regulations. And so firms are very free to choose whatever they want. Actually, because of that, sometimes the subsidy programs are being withdrawn completely because the regulators find out that the subsidy is not financing the technologies that we would hope they would. So my thought on that is that we don't have to specifically withdraw those subsidies, but rather we should just really make sure that we're very specific on what type of technologies firms choose instead.
I also have a question. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I'm indeed wondering about what would happen if you would apply the same methodology, but then to today's situation, because so much has changed, not only as regards to the policies, but also as regards to the goals and the targets on a country level, and especially for the Netherlands, I think. If you would apply the methodology to today's situation, what would you change there in order to improve?
For the companies, or?
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to, it's true that it's very difficult to extrapolate from those years to now. But I'm thinking that, yeah, so it's kind of what when I told Ronald that we, give me a second. So I'm thinking that firms, they still face the same problems and they work in a similar way. However, it's true that the environment, the setting has changed a bit, but I still hold thought that we should just be much more specific about what kind of technologies the firms should use those subsidies for. So on one hand, we do want them to exercise flexibility. We do not want to constrain them so that they're not locked in technologies. But at the same time, we want to give them a good direction on what kind of technologies we consider superior. And this is a very difficult thing to balance, because at the same time, we want to give the flexibility, but also a good direction. So I think that's the main issue with subsidies.
Yeah, indeed. And I also expect that in today's situation, because there's so much more pressure from the outside and also from the government, that there would definitely be a shift from more of end of pipe technologies to more technologies that change the whole process, I would expect at least.
I'm not quite confident about this, but this is something that I would like to see. And I hope that once I get the data, I can confirm this for you, but I'm not sure, because I can see also a lot of avoidance. There is, I mean, maybe in the Dutch setting, it's not true, because there is much more willingness to participate in this, but in many countries, there is still a lot of resistance, because people are just afraid of the costs and the changes. But I hope you're right. And I'll keep you posted.
Thank you.
Maybe some other people have a question. If not, I've got a simple one. Okay, so you studied the green energy subsidies, basically. Have you come across similar results for different type of environmental subsidies?
Yes, so actually, in my PhD thesis, I studied environmental investment tax incentives, which work similarly to subsidies, because basically the part of the amount of money that you invest in green technology, you basically subtract from your tax. And that specific tax incentive was equal to around 10% of total investment cost. And because it was financing mostly end-of-pipe technologies, it was withdrawn completely from the Spanish income corporate tax. So yes, I can see similar things. However, in that particular paper, I analyzed a policy change. So what they have tried to do in 2011 is they tried to discourage financing of end-of-pipe technologies, and they actually did it successfully for 4 years before it was phased out completely. So I want to give this thread of hope that if we want to modify existing subsidies or tax incentives, I believe that this can be done, and I believe I have evidence to support this.
And how did they do this? So they specified clearly they didn't want end of pipe.
Exactly. They specified that they want to prioritize cleaner production over end of pipe. Yeah. So we observed a reduction in financing of end of pipe technologies post 2011. So they were much more stringent and successfully so.
And it worked.
Yes. I may also say that I have also investigated how policy mix between subsidies and environmental taxes work. What we found in a paper, which was actually recently published in Research Policy, it's a paper with Jose Garcia Quevedo and Nestor Martinez Ros. We show that a policy mix between investment subsidies and environmental taxes can work very well, even at low levels of environmental taxation. So firms are inclined, they invest much more money in adoption of green technologies under the policy mix compared to a situation where they just receive subsidy alone.
So why is that?
Probably because there is this push and pull. So if they receive solely the subsidy, they just want to implement a new technology. However, if there is an existing environmental taxation, which is also announced to be increasing in the future, maybe firms are more forward-looking and they're willing to spend more money on investment, also in preparation for the upcoming future.
So you better change their behavior as a
yes, you incentivize them much more, okay. Kind of like a carrot and a rod.
Oh, yeah, okay, clear.
I also have another question that popped up in my mind, because I think what might be rather interesting with the data you gathered between 1999, I thought, and 2011, is the introduction of the EU ETS. Do you see the impact of that on your results?
We have tried to tackle this, if I'm correct. But we did not see much there, to be honest. But yeah, it's not. I think that the EU ETS was just beginning at that point in time, so the effects were maybe not as profound. If we would have access to more recent data, I believe there would be more there to discover. But also, it was not a focus of our analysis, so that's why we didn't put as much emphasis on this.
Clear, thank you.
I'm out of my questions. So is there maybe someone else who has a question for Kinga?
I think there are about 23 people in the chat, so I believe someone should have a question. You can just put it in the Q&A.
Now there's a chat. Tommy Mars Shall I read it out, Tommy? So what was the biggest surprise you saw in the results over time?
Biggest surprise. So it was sadly, it was definitely not the fact that firms use it to finance end-of-pipe technologies. This was something that I sadly expected, but I was really surprised to see that firms actually divert some of the money away for R&D, because I mean, it's a standard, this crowding in, crowding out is a standard concern that firms that would have invested in green technology adoption anyway, they use the subsidies, but it might also mean that firms that would have invested anyway, they still use the subsidy and they try to use the subsidy for other productive purposes. So maybe I'm a bit too optimistic, but this is something that we can observe here, and it surprised me.
Thank you, Kinga. Well, I haven't seen any other questions coming up. Tommy, I hope that this answer, okay, Tommy says thanks, so it satisfies him. I don't see any other questions coming in. So maybe slowly I will go to the end then. Kinga, thank you very much for this very clear and interesting presentation about an interesting study as well. Well, I've seen the presentation before and it again triggered me. So thank you very much for your willingness to present this to all, for the people of BAEE and IAEE. Yeah, I think I will hereby, by thanking you, end this webinar. For all those people, we at BAEE try to organize these kind of webinars several times a year. If you do have any suggestions, or if you want to do a presentation, organize a webinar using BAEE, then please send us an email. We are very willing to host you, to put it this way, and also in cooperation with our friends from International Association for Energy Economics, IAEE. So, Kinga, thank you very much for your presentation today. Looking forward to meeting you again. And I think I hand now the presentation back to Rebecca. Is that the case?
Yes, IAEE would like to thank Kinga and all of BAEE for an outstanding webinar. This webinar will be available on IAEE's website for future download. If you're not already a member of IAEE, we encourage you to join by visiting www.iaee.org. We thank you for attending, and I officially close this webinar.